3 years ago, I quietly stopped my husband from ending his life without him ever knowing I knew. He thought it was just a coincidence I took him on a trip that day. He thought I never saw the signs. But this morning, I found a letter in his sock drawer that said, "You saved me. I knew you knew. I just couldn't admit it until now." My husband and I are 28. We have 3 kids. He's the only boyfriend I've ever had. He's been with me since high school. He's always had low self-esteem. I do too, but not like he does. One day we got new phones. Maybe 7 years ago, I found out I can read his texts. He can see mine too, but he didn't know about it. This happened for like another 2 years. For his birthday and Christmas, I'd snoop around his texts and see if there's something he was talking about that he wanted. One day, around November, I was being nosy to see what I can get him for Christmas. I was pregnant with our second child at the time. I saw he was texting someone something suspicious saying, "Where can we meet?" And I thought this was with another girl. I read them more, and I found out he was buying drugs. My husband and I don't even drink, so I freaked out. I wondered about how long this was going in for if I even knew my own husband anymore. Turns out he was buying something that doesn't get you high but kills you. I looked around everywhere. I tore our room apart and didn't find anything. I went through the search history and all his emails on his phone when he was asleep that night, and found out he was making arrangements for a specific date 3 months after I was due. He was looking at life insurance, which we have had since I'm a stay-at-home mom. He was even looking up how much it costs to be cremated. Once he got home, the first thing I did was sneak his phone and text the guy and say, "I'm no longer interested. If someone else tells you otherwise, it means someone else has my phone," and delete that guy's number. I didn't want him to know I was snooping, but the thought of my husband not being around tore me. I remember being sick to my stomach and bawling in our room, just thinking of the idea of not having him around. I love him more than life in itself. I would die for him and not even have to think about it. My husband is my entire world. That day on, I made sure he knew that, even if it meant embarrassing myself. I started bringing him flowers at work almost every day. When he would come through the door, I would screech with excitement and give him a hug and a smooch and tell him I missed him so much, and I couldn't stop thinking about him all day. When I was out with him, how beautiful and handsome he was. When he was around my friends, I'd say, "Look at my husband. He's so beautiful." I'd call him at work and ask how much longer until he's home. I got him to start going to therapy too. One night I woke him up because I was freaking out and couldn't sleep. I told him I had a nightmare. I said I had a dream he passed away. He said, "Why is that a bad thing?" I told him how he's my entire world, and other than our son and our other on the way, he's all I live for. He said, "But things would be better if I was out of your hair." And I said, "No, they wouldn't. If you left me, it would literally ruin my life." He said, "Not if you're financially well off. You'll be much better off." And I said, "I could have all the money in the world. It would mean nothing if I didn't have you. I'd much rather be homeless, but still have you as my husband than be filthy rich, and you'll be gone." And he said, "Are you serious?" And I said, 100%. I'd sleep under a bridge if it meant I still got to sleep next to you. He said, "I didn't know you felt that way." And I said, "I really do." I asked him if I could go with him to therapy. He said yes. I told his therapist I think he has depression, and he admitted he might. He got a prescription, and it seemed to help him a whole lot, even though it's been 5 years. I still do all those nice things for him, like call him handsome and bring him flowers. I don't ever want him to second guess for a second that he's my sunshine. Last week, I surprised him at work with his favorite lunch from this little sandwich shop near our house. All his coworkers give him crap about it, saying they wish their wives would do stuff like that for them. He always gets this cute, embarrassed look on his face that I absolutely love. Our kids are older now, 8, 6, and 3, and they've started picking up on my habits too. Our oldest, Emma, made him a world's best dad card completely unprompted last month, and he actually teared up when she gave it to him. He keeps it in his wallet and shows it to anyone who'll look. I still check his phone sometimes when he's asleep, but not because I'm worried anymore. It's more like a habit I can't break. I've never found anything concerning since that terrible day. His depression medication seems to be working well, and he sees his therapist regularly. Dr. Bennett has been amazing. She's this older lady with gray hair who reminds me of what a cool grandma would be like. She helped him understand that his feelings weren't just him being dramatic or weak, like he thought. Last Christmas, we had this big family gathering at our house with both our families. His mom noticed how much happier he seemed and actually pulled me aside to thank me. She said, "I don't know what you did, but my son hasn't smiled like this since he was a little boy." I nearly started crying right there by the eggnog. I couldn't exactly tell her that I'd stopped him from killing himself, so I just smiled and said something about how we'd been working on appreciating the little things in life. Speaking of his mom, she's been watching the kids more often so we can have regular date nights. Last Friday, we went to this new Italian place downtown. I wore that blue dress he loves, and he couldn't stop staring at me across the table. On the drive home, he reached over and held my hand, telling me how lucky he felt to have me. Those moments make all the secret worrying worth it. Yesterday morning, I woke up before him and just watched him sleeping for a few minutes. Sometimes I still get hit with this wave of what could have happened, how I might have woken up one day to find him gone forever. Those thoughts make me feel sick even now. I squeezed his hand a little too tight, I guess, because he woke up and immediately asked if I was okay. I just nodded and kissed him, but he could tell something was off. He's gotten better at reading my moods over the years. We were making breakfast together. He was flipping pancakes while I cut up strawberries for the kids, when he suddenly asked if I ever regretted marrying so young. The question caught me completely off guard, and I accidentally sliced my finger. It wasn't deep, but he immediately dropped everything to help me. As he was wrapping a band-aid around my finger with this intense look of concentration, I told him marrying him was the best decision I'd ever made. I meant it too. After the kids were at school and daycare, I found myself thinking about his question while doing laundry. I wondered if he was having doubts again. Lately, he'd been quieter than usual, spending more time in his home office after the kids went to bed. So I decided to plan something special for our upcoming anniversary next month. I called his brother Michael, who's become a good friend over the years, and arranged for him to get a few days off work without telling him. Michael works as Tom's boss at the same company, which makes these little conspiracies easier to pull off. Then I booked this cute cabin up in the mountains that we'd always talked about visiting. The whole time I was making these arrangements, I kept thinking about how far we'd come from that terrible day when I found those messages. I was so deep in planning mode that I didn't hear him come home for lunch, something he rarely does. He found me on the phone with the cabin rental place, and I had to quickly pretend I was just looking into vacation spots for some day. He seemed distracted though, barely eating the sandwich I made him. When I asked what was wrong, he just shrugged and said, "Work was stressful." Before leaving, he hugged me a little longer than usual, which which set off my internal alarm bells. That night after dinner, while the kids were watching a movie, I casually asked about his therapy sessions. He told me Dr. Bennett would be taking some time off soon, and he'd be seeing someone new temporarily. He didn't seem happy about it. Change has always been hard for him, especially with people he trusts. I suggested maybe he could take a break from therapy for a while since he's been doing so well, but he immediately shut that down, saying the medication only works well because of the therapy. He must have seen the worry on my face because he quickly changed the subject to Emma's upcoming school play. The next morning, I caught him staring at an old photo of us from high school. It was taken at prom, me in a ridiculous sparkly dress and him in a rented tux that was too big in the shoulders. I asked him what he was thinking about and he said, "We were just kids. We had no idea what was coming." Something about the way he said it made my chest tight. I sat down next to him and put my head on his shoulder, telling him that whatever came next, we'd handle it together like we always do. He nodded, but didn't say anything else. Later that day, I found myself parked outside his office building during my grocery run. I hadn't planned to stop, but something pulled me there. I texted him asking if he wanted to grab coffee, trying to make it seem spontaneous. He replied that he was in a meeting, so I headed home, feeling a bit foolish. When I got there, I had 3 missed calls from Sarah, my best friend since college. She sounded upset when I called back, saying she needed to talk in person. We met at the park while the little one played on the swings. Sarah seemed nervous, avoiding eye contact while telling me about her cousin's recent divorce. Then she took a deep breath and said, "Look, I don't know if I should tell you this, but I saw Tom at the mall yesterday. Tom is my husband. He told me he was working late." Sarah continued, "He was with some woman. They were sitting really close at the coffee shop." My heart dropped to my stomach. Sarah quickly added, "It could be totally innocent, a co-worker or something. I just thought you should know." I nodded numbly, thanked her, and gathered up my 3-year-old Sam to head home. My mind was racing. This didn't make sense, not after everything we'd been through. I checked his location on my phone, something I rarely do anymore, and saw he was indeed at work now. That night, I watched him carefully as he played with the kids. Nothing seemed different. He helped Emma with her homework, built a Lego tower with our middle child Aiden, and read Sam a bedtime story. After the kids were asleep, he settled on the couch next to me and asked about my day. I couldn't bring myself to mention what Sarah had told me. Instead, I asked if he'd had any meetings outside the office recently. He paused for a second too long before saying no, just the usual workday. I felt sick. For the first time in years, I stayed awake until he fell asleep so I could check his phone. I felt guilty for doubting him, but Sarah's words kept echoing in my head. His phone showed nothing suspicious. No unknown contacts, no strange texts. Relief washed over me, but then I noticed his work email was logged out, which wasn't normal. The next day, I dropped the kids at school and decided to do some recon. I drove to his office and sat in the parking lot, watching the entrance. I felt ridiculous, like some character in a bad TV show. After 20 minutes of nothing, I was about to leave when I saw him exit the building with a woman I didn't recognize. She was about our age, professionally dressed with long dark hair. They walked to her car, talking animatedly about something. Before she got in, she handed him what looked like a business card. He smiled, said something that made her laugh, and then they parted ways. It seemed innocent enough, but why had he lied about meeting people outside work? I drove home completely confused. Later that afternoon, while cleaning our bedroom, I found a business card tucked in his dresser drawer. It was for a real estate agent named Rebecca Chen. On the back, she'd written her personal cell number. My mind immediately went to the worst case scenario. Was he planning to leave? Buy a separate place? But then I remembered how just last week he'd been talking about possibly finding a bigger house since the kids were growing up so fast. I felt silly for jumping to conclusions. That evening, I casually mentioned that we might need more space as the kids get older. His face lit up, and he immediately started talking about neighborhoods we might consider, school districts, and how nice it would be to have a proper home office instead of the converted closet he was using now. The genuine excitement in his voice eased my fears about the real estate agent. The next day was Saturday, and he suggested we take the kids to the park. While Emma and Aiden played on the jungle gym and Sam dug in the sandbox, we sat on a bench watching them. Out of nowhere, he took my hand and said, "I'm really proud of the life we've built together." It was such a simple statement, but it hit me hard after the roller coaster of emotions I'd been feeling. I squeezed his hand and leaned against his shoulder. On Monday morning, after dropping the kids off, I decided to surprise him with coffee at work. His assistant Jessica greeted me warmly and said he was in a meeting but should be done soon. While waiting, I noticed a framed photo on his desk that hadn't been there during my last visit. It was a picture of all 5 of us from our beach trip last summer. As I was studying it, his office door opened, and he emerged with that same woman I'd seen him with in the parking lot. He looked surprised to see me, but quickly recovered and introduced me to Rebecca Chen, the real estate agent. She smiled warmly and said she'd heard so much about me and the kids. So Tom explained that he'd been looking at properties as a surprise for our anniversary, but now the cat was out of the bag. I felt a wave of relief and guilt about my suspicions. Rebecca excused herself, and Tom kissed me, asking what brought me by. I handed him the coffee and made up something about being in the area. That night, I decided to come clean about my worries. After the kids were in bed, I told him about seeing him with Rebecca, and how Sarah had spotted them at the mall. He looked confused at first, then burst out laughing. He explained that he'd been meeting with Rebecca to find us a perfect new home as an anniversary surprise, and the mall meeting happened because they'd bumped into each other while he was buying a gift for me. He pulled out his phone and showed me pictures of houses he'd been considering. I felt simultaneously relieved and foolish. He hugged me tight and promised there would never be anyone else for him. The next few days were peaceful. I continued planning our anniversary getaway while he apparently continued his house hunting. On Thursday, I was cleaning out his car while he was at work. Our middle child had spilled juice all over the back seat when I found a crumpled receipt on the floor. It was from a jewelry store dated 2 days earlier. My heart skipped. Was he planning another surprise? I carefully put it back where I found it and tried to forget about it, wanting to let him have his moment. That weekend, his mood seemed to shift again. He was quieter, more introspective. When I asked if something was bothering him, he just shook his head and said he was tired from work. On Sunday night, after a particularly quiet day, I found him sitting alone on our back porch, staring at nothing in particular. I sat next to him and just waited. Finally, he turned to me and asked, "Do you ever think about how different our lives could have been?" The question sent a chill through me. I asked what he meant, and he shrugged, saying, "Just paths not taken, I guess." I reminded him that we'd chosen this path together, and I'd never regretted it for a second. He nodded, squeezed my hand, and we sat in silence watching the stars come out. Monday morning before he left for work, he hugged me extra tight and whispered, "I love you more than you'll ever ever know, in my ear. It was such a serious tone that I pulled back to look at his face, asking if everything was okay. He smiled and said of course he was just feeling grateful. After he left, I found myself uneasy, that familiar worry creeping back in. I decided to call Dr. Bennett's office, not to snoop, but just to ease my mind. I asked the receptionist if my husband's next appointment could be moved up, claiming he'd been feeling more anxious lately. The receptionist checked and said, "Actually, doctor, Bennett had to cancel all appointments for the next week. Family emergency. Your husband should have received a call yesterday." That was strange. He hadn't mentioned any cancellation. When he came home that evening, I casually asked how his therapy session went and he said, "Fine, same as usual." I felt that sickness in my stomach again. He'd lied to me. After dinner, while he was helping the kids with bath time, I checked his phone. There were no calls from Dr. Bennett's office, but I did find something else. He'd been researching how to tell children about separation and peaceful co-parenting. My heart nearly stopped. Was this what the real estate hunting was really about? Finding a separate place to live? The jewelry? A parting gift? I put his phone down, hands shaking. I couldn't confront him with the kids awake, so I went through the motions of our evening routine with a fake smile plastered on my face. Once everyone was asleep, I sat him down in the kitchen and asked point blank if he was planning to leave me. The look of shock on his face seemed genuine. "Leave you? Are you serious? Where is this coming from?" I told him about finding the searches on his phone, and his face fell. He was quiet for a long moment, then said, "I've been trying to figure out how to tell you something, but it's not what you think." He explained that his brother Michael had called him last week. Michael and his wife were separating, and he'd been asking Tom for advice on how to tell their kids. He hadn't mentioned it because Michael had asked him to keep it private until they figured things out. The real estate hunting was genuinely for us, and the jewelry was an anniversary gift. I felt relief wash over me, but also shame for doubting him again. He held my hands across the table and asked why I'd jumped to such a conclusion. I couldn't tell him about my old fears resurfacing, so I blamed it on being overtired and hearing too many divorce stories from friends. He accepted this explanation, but I could tell he was hurt by my lack of trust. The next morning, I woke up determined to make it up to him. I made his favorite breakfast and packed a special lunch with a note apologizing again for doubting him. When he kissed me goodbye, he seemed back to normal, telling me he'd be home early to help with dinner. Around noon, I got a text from an unknown number that just said, "Is this Tom's wife?" I responded asking who it was. The reply came, "This is Dr. Bennett's emergency replacement doctor, Harris. Tom missed his appointment this morning and isn't answering his phone. Since he listed you as his emergency contact, I wanted to check if everything is all right." I stared at the phone, confused. If he wasn't at therapy, where was he? I texted back that I'd have him call, then immediately called Tom's office. Jessica answered and told me he'd called in sick today. Now I was really worried. I called his cell, but it went straight to voicemail. I called Michael next, thinking maybe he was with his brother, but Michael hadn't heard from him either. Panic rising, I dropped Sam off with our neighbor and drove to all the places I could think of. His favorite coffee shop, the park where he sometimes took lunch breaks, even the cemetery where his father was buried. No sign of him anywhere. By the time I picked up the older kids from school, I was frantic. I called Sarah to come stay with them and was about to call the police when my phone rang. It was Tom. His voice sounded strange, tired. "I'm sorry for worrying you," he said. "I needed some time to think. I'm at the beach." The beach was almost 2 hours away. I asked if he was okay, if he needed me to come get him. "No," he said. "I'll be home for dinner. We need to talk, but everything's okay. I promise." Those 4 hours waiting for him were some of the longest of my life. Sarah stayed with me, trying to keep me calm, but my mind kept cycling through worst-case scenarios. When he finally walked through the door, he looked exhausted but calm. He thanked Sarah for staying, waited for her to leave, then asked me to sit down. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely hear him when he started speaking. "I've been keeping something from you," he began, and my stomach dropped. "Next week is the 5-year anniversary of the day I almost—" He trailed off, unable to say it. "The day I almost ended my life." I froze, not knowing how to respond. He knew the date? He continued, "I never told you this, but I remember every detail of my plan. The date was circled in my mind for months." He took a deep breath. "I've been thinking about it a lot lately, not because I feel that way again, but because I can't believe how much my life has changed since then." Tears filled his eyes. "I went to the beach today because that's where I was going to do it. I wanted to see it again with new eyes, to remind myself how far I've come." I was crying now too, relief and pain mixing together. He reached for my hands. "I didn't go to therapy today because I wanted to face this place on my own, to prove to myself I could. I should have told you, but I didn't want to worry you." I nodded, unable to speak. He squeezed my hands. "I have something for you," he said, pulling a small box from his pocket. "I was going to save it for our anniversary, but after today, I don't want to wait." Inside was a delicate gold necklace with 5 small stars. "One for each year you've been saving me," he said quietly, "even though you didn't know it." I felt strange wearing that necklace the next day, like I was hiding a huge secret even though he was the one who'd given it to me. I couldn't stop touching the 5 little stars while doing laundry and making lunches for the kids. Every time my fingers brushed against it, I remembered his words about me saving him without knowing it. Except I did know. I'd been carrying the secret for 5 years, and now he'd given me this beautiful gift thinking I had no idea what the 5 stars really meant. That night after he gave me the necklace, we talked for hours after the kids went to bed. He opened up more than he ever had about those dark days, telling me how the depression had crept up on him so slowly, he didn't recognize it until he was drowning in it. He described feeling like he was watching our family from behind a glass wall, seeing us laugh and love but not being able to truly feel it himself. I held his hand the whole time, fighting the urge to tell him I knew more than he realized. When he finally fell asleep, I slipped out of bed and went to the kitchen. I pulled out the emergency bottle of wine I keep for girls' nights and poured myself a glass. The house was completely silent except for the hum of the refrigerator as I tried to figure out what to do next. I started making a mental pro-con list about telling him the truth. On one hand, we'd just had this breakthrough moment of honesty. On the other hand, would knowing I'd been secretly monitoring him for years damage the trust we'd rebuilt? I didn't get any sleep that night. The next morning, I was a zombie making breakfast while Tom helped the kids get ready for school. He kept giving me these concerned looks, probably noticing the dark circles under my eyes. He corralled the kids out the door, kissing me goodbye and whispering that we'd talk more that night. After everyone left, I called Sarah and asked her to meet me at the coffee shop near her house. I needed advice from someone who knew us both. When I got there, Sarah was already waiting with 2 large coffees and a concerned look on her face. I gave her the short version of what happened: Tom's beach trip, his confession about the anniversary anniversary and the necklace. I left out the part where I'd known all along. Sarah teared up when I showed her the necklace with the 5 stars. That's beautiful, she said. But why do you look like your dog just died? I took a deep breath and told her everything. Finding the texts 5 years ago, canceling the dealer, the whole stealth intervention plan. Sarah's jaw literally dropped. She'd known we'd gone through a rough patch but had no idea how serious it had been. You've been carrying this alone for 5 years? She asked. I nodded, sipping my coffee to hide the tears forming. And now I don't know if I should tell him or just let it go. Sarah thought about it for a minute. If the roles were reversed, would you want to know? She finally asked. That question hit me hard. If Tom had secretly saved me from myself, would I want to know about it? Before I could answer, my phone rang. It was Emma's school. She had a fever and needed to be picked up. I promised Sarah I'd think about what she said and rushed off to get my daughter. Emma was miserable with a stomach bug, so I spent the day taking care of her and trying not to think about my dilemma. Tom called during his lunch break to check in, and I filled him in on Emma's condition. He offered to come home early, but I told him we were managing fine. After hanging up, I realized how much things had changed. 5 years ago, he might have seen a sick child as one more burden he couldn't handle. Now he was offering to rearrange his day to help. That night, after getting Emma settled with medicine and crackers, Tom and I sat on the couch with cups of tea. He immediately noticed something was off with me. You've been quiet all day, he said. Is it about what I told you yesterday? About the anniversary? I nodded, not trusting myself to speak without spilling everything. He took my hand. I didn't mean to upset you. I just needed you to know how far I've come, thanks to you. I couldn't take it anymore. The words just tumbled out before I could stop them. I knew Tom. I've known for 5 years. His face went blank with confusion. What do you mean? I took a deep breath and told him everything, finding the texts on his phone, seeing the research about life insurance and cremation, realizing he was planning to die by suicide. I explained how I texted the dealer from his phone canceling everything, then started my campaign to show him how much I loved him. His face went through a whole range of emotions as I talked. Shock, confusion, hurt, and something I couldn't quite identify. When I finished, he just sat there staring at me. Then he got up without a word and walked outside to the backyard. I sat frozen, unsure if I should follow him or give him space. After 10 minutes that felt like 10 hours, I went outside. He was sitting on the steps looking up at the stars. I sat down beside him, not touching him, just waiting. You knew this whole time, he finally said, his voice flat. I nodded, then realized he wasn't looking at me. Yes, I whispered. Why didn't you tell me? The hurt in his voice broke my heart. I tried to explain how terrified I'd been, scared of losing him, scared of him finding out I'd invaded his privacy, scared my confronting him might push him over the edge. He listened without looking at me, his body tense. When I finished, he finally turned to me. So everything, the sudden affection, suggesting therapy, all of it was all because you found out? I could see where his mind was going. No, I said firmly, taking his hand even though he tried to pull away. I did those things because I love you. Finding those messages just opened my eyes to how badly you were hurting and how close I was to losing you. He didn't say anything for a long time. I started shivering in the night air but didn't want to be the first to move. Finally, he spoke. I need some time to process this. He stood up and went inside. I followed him, watching as he grabbed a pillow and blanket from the closet. I'm going to sleep in the office tonight, he said without looking at me. I just need to think. My heart sank, but I nodded. I understand. I didn't sleep at all that night. I heard him moving around in the home office several times. Around 3 a.m., I got up to check on Emma and found Tom sitting at her bedside watching her sleep. He didn't acknowledge me, just got up and went back to the office. The next morning was awkward. We moved around each other making breakfast and getting the boys ready for school. Tom called in sick to stay home with Emma, and I headed to work at the bakery where I help out part-time. My boss Karen took one look at my face and asked what was wrong. I just shook my head, not ready to talk about it. I messed up 3 orders in the first hour. At lunchtime, Karen pulled me aside and told me to go home. Whatever's going on, you need to fix it, she said. You're no good to me like this. I drove home slowly, dreading what might be waiting. When I walked in, the house was quiet. Emma was asleep on the couch, and Tom was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and a notebook in front of him. He looked up when I came in but didn't smile. We need to talk, he said. I nodded and sat down across from him, heart pounding. He'd written a list of questions in the notebook. Very Tom. Always organized, even in a crisis. He started going through them systematically. Did I still check his phone? Sometimes, but less often now. Did I trust him? Yes, but old habits were hard to break. Who else knew about this? Just Sarah, and only since yesterday. With each answer, his expression softened slightly. Then came the hardest question. Why didn't you just talk to me back then? I tried to explain how terrified I'd been, how everything I'd read said confronting someone directly about suicide plans could backfire. He listened, nodding occasionally. When I finished, he closed the notebook and took a deep breath. I'm not going to pretend I'm okay with you going through my phone for years, he said, but I also can't pretend I don't understand why you did it. He reached across the table and took my hand. You saved my life, Mel. I can't be mad at you for that. The relief hit me so hard I started crying. Tom moved around the table and pulled me into his arms. We need to establish better communication going forward, he said into my hair, but we'll figure it out together. That night, after the kids were in bed, we made a plan. I agreed to stop checking his phone, and he agreed to be more open about his mental health struggles. We decided to go back to couples therapy to work on our communication. It felt like we were starting a new chapter. The next few weeks were a strange mix of painful and healing. We had some tough conversations in therapy about trust and privacy. Dr. Harris, our new therapist, suggested we each keep journals to write down things we found difficult to say out loud. Tom threw himself into researching depression and suicide prevention. He even joined an online support group for people who had experienced suicidal thoughts. One night, about a month after my confession, he came to bed with a serious look on his face. I want to share something with you, he said, pulling out his phone. He showed me an email he'd written to his mom, explaining everything. His depression, the suicide plan from 5 years ago, how I'd secretly intervened, and how he was doing now. I haven't sent it yet, he said, but I think it's time she knew. She's always wondered why I suddenly started therapy. I read the email, tearing up at how openly he described his journey. Are you sure? I asked. He nodded. I don't want secrets between us anymore. Not with you, not with the people who love us. He hit send before he could change his mind. mind. His mom called the next morning, sobbing. She drove over immediately and hugged us both for what felt like an hour. Why didn't you tell me? She kept asking him. He explained how ashamed he felt, how he hadn't wanted to burden anyone. His mom turned to me then, holding both my hands. Thank you for saving my boy, she said. I just nodded, unable to speak around the lump in my throat. After she left, Tom seemed lighter somehow, like sharing his story had lifted some of the weight he'd been carrying. That weekend, we took the kids to the park. While they played on the swings, Tom and I sat on a bench watching them. I've been thinking, he said. Maybe we should be more open about mental health with the kids too. Not the details, but the basic concept that sometimes people's brains get sick just like their bodies do. I agreed it was important, especially since depression can run in families. We started having simple conversations with the kids about feelings, making it normal to talk about being sad or anxious. Emma was especially interested, asking thoughtful questions about why people feel sad sometimes. The following month, Tom got a promotion at work. His brother Michael specifically mentioned his improved confidence and leadership skills over the past few years. We celebrated with a fancy dinner out, getting his mom to watch the kids. Over dessert, he reached for my hand. I wouldn't be here without you, he said. Not just at this dinner, but anywhere. I squeezed his hand. I'm just glad you stayed, I replied. He looked at me for a long moment. I need to ask you something, and I want an honest answer. My stomach tightened, but I nodded. Do you regret telling me that you knew? I thought about it carefully. No, I finally said. I regret not telling you sooner. I think I was living in fear for too long. He nodded, looking relieved. That's what I thought too. It feels better now, doesn't it? No secrets between us. A week later, I got a message from a woman named Elizabeth, saying Tom had given her my number. She explained that her husband was showing signs of depression, and Tom thought I might have advice for her as a spouse. I called her immediately, and spent 2 hours sharing what I'd learned about supporting a partner through depression. It felt good to turn our painful experience into something helpful for someone else. Tom and I started becoming more open with friends about our journey, not sharing every detail, but not hiding the fact that he'd struggled with depression and had gotten help. Several of Tom's friends reached out to him privately afterward, admitting they'd had similar thoughts but never told anyone. One night, he came home from meeting a college buddy looking both drained and energized. Joseph's going to call his doctor tomorrow, he told me. He's been feeling the same way I was back then, but never knew how to describe it until we talked. I hugged him tight, so proud of how he was using his experience to help others. As our anniversary approached, we decided to still go on the cabin trip I'd planned, but now it was a celebration of honesty rather than a secret getaway. The morning we were supposed to leave, he surprised me with a beautiful anniversary gift. The jewelry I'd found the receipt for turned out to be a diamond bracelet that matched my wedding ring. I felt silly for ever thinking it might have been a parting gift. The cabin was even more beautiful than the pictures online, all warm wood and huge windows overlooking the mountains. The first night there, we sat on the porch wrapped in blankets watching the stars. I've been thinking about the necklace I gave you, Tom said. The 5 stars. I touched it reflexively. I hadn't taken it off since he gave it to me. What about it? I asked. I want to add a star every year, he said, to mark another year of choosing to stay, another year of choosing us. I leaned against him, feeling his solid warmth. I'd like that, I said. When we got home from our trip, life went back to its usual chaos of school runs, work, and keeping 3 kids alive and happy. But something had fundamentally shifted between us. The weight of my secret was gone, and Tom seemed more present than ever before. One Monday morning, as we were all rushing to get out the door, Aiden spilled orange juice all over his school clothes. 5 years ago, this minor disaster might have sent Tom into a spiral of frustration. Instead, he laughed, helped Aiden change, and still got him to school on time. Later that day, I found a text from Tom on my phone, just thinking about how much I love our chaotic life. Little moments like that showed me how far we'd come. The next month, Tom's therapy group decided to organize a mental health awareness walk. Our whole family participated, the kids proudly wearing t-shirts saying, "Walking for Dad." Tom gave a short speech at the beginning about his journey, openly discussing how close he'd come to ending his life, and how getting help had saved him. I stood in the crowd with tears streaming down my face, so proud of his courage. Afterward, a line of people formed to talk to him, many sharing their own struggles. Emma tugged on my hand and asked, "Was Dad really that sick once?" I knelt down to her level. "Yes, honey. His brain was sick, but he got help and got better. That's why we talk about our feelings in our family, remember?" She nodded solemnly. "I'm glad he got better," she said. "Me too, baby," I whispered. "Me too." That night, Tom found me looking through old photos from when the kids were little. He sat next to me, pointing at a picture from Aiden's first birthday. "I remember that day," he said quietly. "I was already planning to be gone by then." I leaned against him. "But you're here." He nodded. "I'm here." We sat in comfortable silence, flipping through the album. "You know," he said eventually, "I think we should write this down someday. Our story might help someone else." The idea took root, and we started writing down our experiences. Tom from his perspective, me from mine. It was painful revisiting those dark days, but also healing to see how far we'd come. We weren't planning to publish it, just to have it as a record for ourselves and maybe our kids when they were older. As the months passed, we settled into a new normal. I stopped checking Tom's phone entirely, finding I didn't even have the urge anymore. Tom continued with his therapy and medication, now viewing them as tools for wellness rather than signs of weakness. We had our ups and downs like any couple, but the foundation of honesty we'd built made even our arguments more productive. One night after a particularly stressful day with the kids, I found Tom sitting in the dark in our bedroom. My heart immediately raced with old fears. I sat beside him and asked if he was okay. "Just tired," he said. "Not that kind of tired, just regular parent tired. 5 years ago, I would have stayed up all night worrying. Now, I believed him. I suggested a hot shower and an early night, and he agreed with a tired smile. The next morning, he was back to his usual self, making pancakes with Sam and planning a weekend camping trip with the older kids. 2 months after our anniversary trip, I found out I was pregnant again. It wasn't planned. We thought our family was complete with 3 kids. I was nervous about telling Tom, worried about adding more stress to our lives. I bought a little onesie that said, "Big surprise," and wrapped it up. When I gave it to him that evening, he looked confused at first. Then his eyes widened in shock. "Are you serious?" he asked. I nodded, biting my lip. He let out a whoop of joy and picked me up, spinning me around the kitchen while the kids watched in confusion. Later, after explaining to the kids they'd be getting a new brother or sister, Tom and I lay in bed talking about the future. "Are you really okay with this?" I asked. "More than okay," he said. 5 years ago, I couldn't imagine being alive today, let alone having another child. Now I can't wait to to meet this new little person. His hand rested on my still flat stomach. Life is so much better than I ever thought it could be. The pregnancy wasn't easy. Morning sickness hit me hard, and running after 3 kids while growing a 4th was exhausting. Tom stepped up amazingly, taking over more of the household duties and kid wrangling. One Saturday while I was napping, he took all 3 kids grocery shopping, something that would have overwhelmed him in the past. They came home with all the items on the list plus flowers for me. At my 20-week scan, we found out we were having another girl. The technician pointed out her tiny hands and feet on the screen while Tom held my hand tight. Another daughter, he whispered, his voice full of wonder. On the way home, we discussed names. What about Hope? Tom suggested. It seems fitting. I loved it immediately. That night, he added a 6th star to my necklace. For Hope, he said simply. As my due date approached, Tom started having nightmares. He'd wake up gasping, not wanting to tell me what they were about. Finally, after a particularly bad one, he admitted he'd been dreaming about not being there for the birth, about leaving us alone. I held him close. But that's not going to happen, I reminded him. You're here. You're staying. He nodded against my shoulder. I know. Sometimes my brain just replays the old fears. The next day, he called Dr. Bennett and scheduled an extra session. He came home looking calmer. She reminded me that intrusive thoughts aren't the same as intentions, he explained. Just because my brain brings up the old escape plan doesn't mean I want to follow it. 2 weeks before my due date, my water broke in the middle of the night. We called Tom's mom to come stay with the kids and headed to the hospital. Hope Elizabeth arrived after 6 hours of labor, perfect and screaming her little lungs out. Tom cut the cord with shaking hands, tears streaming down his face. When they placed her on my chest, he leaned down and whispered, "Thank you for fighting for us, for making sure I was here for this." His mom brought the kids to meet their new sister that afternoon. Emma immediately appointed herself assistant baby manager, while the boys were more interested in the hospital bed controls. Watching Tom introduce our sons to their new sister, I felt a wave of gratitude so strong it took my breath away. This moment almost didn't exist. He almost wasn't here for any of it. As if reading my thoughts, Tom looked up and met my eyes across the room. The love and gratitude reflected there matched my own. The first few weeks with a newborn were chaotic, just as we remembered. Sleep deprivation hit us both hard, but Tom remained steady. He got up for night feedings without complaint, often telling me to go back to sleep while he walked the halls with a fussy Hope. One night when she was about a month old, I woke up to find Tom's side of the bed empty. I found him in the nursery, not just holding Hope but talking to her softly. "You were a surprise, little one, but the best kind," he was saying. "You're named Hope because that's what your mom gave me when I didn't have any left." I stayed quiet in the doorway, not wanting to interrupt this private moment. "I almost missed meeting you and your brothers and sister," he continued. "I almost missed everything, but Mom saved me, even when I didn't know I needed saving." I must have made a sound because he looked up then, giving me a soft smile. "Just telling Hope our story," he said. I joined them in the rocking chair, squeezing in beside Tom. "When she's older, we'll tell her the whole thing," I said. "All of them." Tom nodded. "No secrets between us. That's our family motto now, right?" I rested my head on his shoulder, watching our daughter's sleeping face. "Right." As Hope grew from newborn to infant, life gradually became more manageable. Tom got another promotion at work, but insisted on keeping reasonable hours to be home with the family. We started a tradition of Sunday afternoon sharing circles, where everyone got a chance to talk about something good that happened during the week and something that was hard. Even 3-year-old Sam participated, though his hard thing was usually not getting enough dessert. These family check-ins became sacred time for all of us. On Hope's first birthday, we threw a big party with both our families and close friends. After everyone had gone home and the kids were in bed, Tom and I sat on the back porch with glasses of wine. 6 years, he said quietly. I knew immediately what he meant. 6 years since I'd found those messages on his phone. 6 years, I echoed, clinking my glass against his. He looked at me thoughtfully. "You know what's strange? Sometimes I try to remember what it felt like back then, to be so certain that you and the kids would be better off without me, and I just can't access that feeling anymore." I squeezed his hand. "That's a good thing." He nodded. "The best thing." He pulled something from his pocket, a small box. Inside was a 7th star for my necklace. "For year 6, he said, helping me add it to the chain. As he fastened it around my neck, he added, "I'm thinking maybe we should just get you a whole galaxy at this point." I laughed, turning to kiss him. "I like getting them one at a time," I said. "Each one means something." That night in bed, Tom pulled me close. "Thank you for not giving up on me, even when I'd given up on myself," he whispered. "I will never stop being grateful for your determination." I laughed softly in the darkness. "I'm just glad it worked." I felt him smile against my hair, the determination that saved my life. I placed my hand over his heart, feeling its steady beat. "Just promise me one thing," I said. "If those thoughts ever come back, you'll tell me immediately." He covered my hand with his. "I promise. No secrets between us, remember?" As I drifted off to sleep, I found myself thinking about the journey we'd been on. From the terror of discovering his plans, through years of secret vigilance, to finally building a relationship based on complete honesty. It hadn't been easy, and I knew we'd face more challenges as the years went on. But feeling his chest rise and fall beneath my hand, knowing he was here and planning to stay, I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. The next morning, I woke to find him already up, making breakfast with the kids. Hope was in her high chair, happily smashing banana into her hair, while the older 3 argued about whose turn it was to use the chocolate milk syrup. Tom caught my eye across the chaotic kitchen and winked. In that moment, surrounded by the beautiful mess we'd created together, I knew that every difficult step of our journey had been worth it.